Hello, hello, everyone out there in Facebook land. This is your host, Dr. Lakita. And on our Mental Monday show, we have a special conclusion of a series that we started last week. That series is Mind Matters. It was a special two-part series that we wanted to commemorate because of the recent death by suicide of Miss Josh Waters. She was the brilliant writer of This Is Us. It's tragic. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because she was a Black woman that was 39 years young, brilliant, or the fact that we're just in a time where we're in shelter in place and a whole lot of other things are going on. And I was very moved at the fact that someone felt the need to take their life. Being a mental health professional, also a minister of the gospel as well, and having done this work for 25 plus years of merging biblical principles and psychological concept, it's always in my thoughts. Can we reach people that don't know that they can be reached? And so today I'm super uber excited that we're going to talk about Mind Matters Part 2. We're going to talk about trapped trauma. Trapped trauma in the heads of Black women. And we're going to look at the mental health of Black women from a variety of different aspects, but a very real aspect. And I didn't know anyone else to turn to, but my friend that I've learned of by way of other folks and who just kind of seen each other in various circles. And I'm excited that we're getting a chance to connect even on a deeper level, none other than Minister Hazel Cherry. And in a moment, she's getting ready to show you her biographical sketch about who she is and what she's purposed and planned to do and so forth and so on. By way of that choice of a wonderful person, I asked her because I believe that people that are brilliant know other brilliant people. So I wanted her to reach out to someone that she thought would be apt to speak to Black women and their mental health and trapped trauma and what do we do to become better. And she mentioned Reverend Kinwana. And I am super duper excited for you two ladies that would greet me from the East Coast to the West Coast. Welcome to Mental Monday. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So let's just get really started into all of those that are in Facebook land. I see you guys. You guys are jumping on. You make me so happy. You make me feel like I'm Oprah Jr., but you know what's up, right? So, and those of you who are chiming on right now, I see you also in our Zoom chat room to give you a much more personal audience experience. And we're excited. Please make sure that you give your questions because we're going to give opportunity for our expert panelists today to give us answers for stuff that we need answers and clarification on. So let's just get started. All right, Minister Hazel, will you please just give us a biographical sketch of who you are? Do not spare the details. Give us who you are, where you've been, what you've studied, and all that good stuff. You're on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for having me and inviting me to this very important conversation. Black women have been at the center of my work and have always been an area of passion for me. So I bring to you, I hold a BA in pastoral studies with a minor in psychology. And I went on to the Howard University to attend the divinity school year there and obtained my Master of Divinity with a focus on womanist studies. And it was there where I was really able to integrate faith and justice, right? So I had grown up in an environment in Oakland, California, where our church was surrounded by gun violence, by prostitution, homelessness, right? And our church was at the center of that intersection. And we did the work, we did the direct service work. And I always saw that through the hands and the faith of women. So it was very clear to me early on that women had power, right? But these women, how powerful they were, I wondered sometimes who they went home to, who was their rock. And when I learned and got older, it was then that I observed it was other women, right? It was their faith and it was other women. And so my ministry is really focused on connecting women, right? At the heart and at the center, focused on their healing, their liberation, and their wellness from a very holistic standpoint. And so I'm grateful to be with you all today to share in conversation, particularly about a topic that is personal to me as someone who grows through depression, right? Who has bouts of depression and understands what it means to even be close to suicide. So just to talk about that and name those things so that we can grow and grow together through them. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Listen, I'm all the more happy that you are here. And let me tell you, just your introduction has got me I'm ready to go in, but I want to hear about this other brilliant sister that I just love her spirit and love her attitude and her heart and all of that. And so will you please welcome Reverend Kinwana, and she's going to share with us her biographical sketch so we can learn a little bit more about her passion, her life, and her legacy.
Well, thank you so much as well, Dr. Long, for allowing me this great opportunity to share this platform with you and my amazing sister Hazel, Minister Hazel. So I am Reverend Kinwana McRae. I currently reside in Maryland, but I'm a Southern girl. I come from Mississippi. And so I am a twice HBCU graduate. My heart is certainly with HBCUs. I have a very deep soft spot for HBCUs. I graduated with my Bachelor's of Art in English from Tougaloo College. I initially thought, I would go into teaching. But God is so funny. Like every time I took the teacher's exam, I was like maybe 3 or 4 points short of qualifying for an actual license. And so I stilled myself and I said, okay, God, what is this? What are you trying to tell me? And so when my husband, who is currently military, when the military moved us to Virginia in 2011, I stilled myself and I said, okay, God, what is it? I've been in ministry all my life. What is it? What am I not hearing? What am I missing? And so the funny thing was, I literally heard Spirit say, go to seminary. I thought it was a joke because I literally was one of those people who I was kind of like appalled. I was like, who goes to seminary? Who does that? And so when God directed me to Howard, it was the greatest transformation of my life. And so I had my master's in divinity from Howard, graduated with my darling sister Hazel in 2015, and went on to once again explore just where God was taking me with this ministry. And God said, go into chaplaincy. I once again laughed at God. And it's like, God, you really were just going to just make me just like do this, really. Because I really struggled with just the side of death in itself, because my grandfather, my father's parents who raised me since the age of 2, my grandfather died without any real illness or sickness. And so I struggled with once I got into chaplaincy, where they teach you seeing the beauty in death. And that was something I really, really struggled with. So I currently work as, I've been working in chaplaincy for about 5 years. And I currently work as a hospice chaplain specifically. I am currently centering my work and have been centering my work probably for the last 6 or 7 years on Black Gen X women, because I don't really see a lot of our stories or hear a lot of Gen X women's stories at the forefront. And so what my platform, the platform that I am currently creating will allow for Gen X Black women to bring their voices to the forefront so that our stories can be heard. I realize that I am a bridge builder for women across generations. I am a curator of sorts for sacred. I literally hold sacred space for those who are needing to heal from trauma, various traumas. And so and my work is really passionate towards just women across the board, but specifically Black women and Black Gen X women. That's where my heart is.
Well, listen, I'm sitting over here kind of jumping and leaping and all of those types of things, because I realized that one of the things when you mentioned, because I'm Gen X, you know, I like to think that I'm millennial, but we there, hallelujah, right? Um, but so you've made me think that the intro of where we're going today is so vital. So for those of you who are out there in Facebook land and across the world, first of all, I want to thank you guys for just loving and respecting it enough that you're sharing it with everybody. I try very hard to only bring us stuff that's going to be real, raw, but at the end that we will always know that it's God that gives us the ability to move from where we are to where we need to be. But we cannot do that if we have trapped trauma going on in our head. And as Black women, we've kind of bought into a lie, some of us, about how we deal with the things that happen and or don't deal with the things that happen. Molestation, incest, stuff we shouldn't be talking about. You know, the real thing, abuse, control, come on here, manipulation, you know, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and the overcompensation, inferiority complexes, the self-hatred, that's a big one, you know. So I wanted to bring to light with that information with women I thought that could share that sacred space. And let me give you some statistics that will just get us really started. So 13.4% of the US population identifies as Black or African American. What's interesting is that of that, over 16% has responded to the illness of mental health in the past year, which means 7 million people. I just want to give us a good number. While there are 329 million people in the United States, at least 7 million, but I would like to beg to differ. Black folks do not do no talking about what's going on in their household. So I like to make that number to be about 21 million. You understand what I'm saying? And so for me, it's really important that we break the stigmatization that, I think I'm where I am because God allowed me to fight through the depression. And then he taught me why. So that's real critical. He taught me why I got ensnared by depression as a child, which is why I do the work that I do today, literally, really. And so I fight with people and people's mindsets about the fact, historically speaking, all the adversity that we have from slavery to sharecropping to the injustices about how we're going to be. We were free in 1862. We didn't know it until 1865. Come on through here. And so we're still moving in that way. We're free, but most people, come on here. We're free, but most folks don't really know it. So let's really jump into it, and I'll keep doing different statistics along the way, but I'm ready for us to jump into this conversation. Okay. With some brilliant folks. So let's talk for a second. And I want us to be as transparent as we can. Let's put it out there. I'm going to go backwards first. Out of the three of us, who would admit that you've gone through bouts of depression before? My hand is up.
Absolutely. Okay. No shame.
No shame.
No shame.
So let's talk for a second. All right. In the time that you can remember regarding your depression, I haven't gone through it. Can you remember what it was attached to? Was it attached to your own thought process or an outside thought?
Great question.
Anyone can
start, Hazel.
Right.
I want to sit in the duality, right? I want to acknowledge that a lot of what Black women experience is the outside narratives about what it means to be a woman of faith, right? What it means to be a reverend, what it means to, to show up ladylike or to show up as X, Y, and Z. And so there are a lot of external outside voices that can impact, right, the way a woman sees herself, engages herself, right? And that in turn can impact how she internalizes her worth, right? Her value, her capabilities, right? Her competence, right? So I think that for me, at times it's been a little bit of both, right? It's been the stress of the church, right? When I think about early on, when I first accepted my call to ministry at the age of 19, right? And very much fired up for God, and then encountered this level of male leadership that was not supportive of that. And I was clear, right? Even as a young woman, but what do you do with that? Like when the spaces that are supposed to hold you and care for you don't accept you, right? Matter of fact, shun you and shun your gifts in a certain way. So I think that's important to name as well when we're talking about my own personal struggles, right? I have
Yes.
no shame in talking about that now. For the people who are
Absolutely.
watching that knew me at that age, no shame, right? And so even I think about a time when I was in divinity school and very depressed, right? I didn't necessarily have the support at the time that I needed to really deconstruct and reconstruct that theology, right?
So,
And what
so stop right there. You just said something because I want the people, the listening audience, and I want us to introduce concepts that you got from Howard. And I'm a professor as well. And I want our audience to learn. One of the things they always say is that they had their pen and paper out. And I need for us to be professors today because we want to heal. I believe every woman, every man is a nation in itself. So every person that's listening is a nation. So deconstruct and reconstruct. Talk about that and go a little bit deeper about that. What are we reconstructing? What are we deconstructing?
So I just want to name that I acknowledge divinity school as a beautiful process, right? But it is a process of transformation that Kiwana named earlier, if you let it be. So a lot of our professions that we enter into, right, don't necessarily transform us internally, or that's not the intent, right? But a good student, right, goes through divinity school or seminary and allows that to sort of transform their internal work around how they do sharing the gospel, around how they engage with other people, right? And so it is a process because you are learning to unlearn a lot of what you have been taught. And I will give you a prime example. I grew up being taught that our LGBTQAI family, right, that it was not something that we supported, right? There's a lot of language around, you know, love the person but hate the sinner, right? Like all that language. And in my particular experience, I was learning different concepts that was like, wait a minute, you gotta rethink this, right? And so in learning that, right, that's something you have to deconstruct, meaning take apart, right, and really evaluate what is the faith claim here. And when I say faith claim, I mean, what is that faith naming in this moment, right? And then reconstruct that to something that is more holistic and authentic to who you are right now, right? And so for me, that is how I came out of divinity school, loving on every human, right? And that means folks who are beyond or don't subscribe to Christianity, right?
Absolutely.
Muslim, Buddhist, wherever you are, like God is bigger than what I ever thought, right? And so that's what I mean by to deconstruct the thing and then reconstruct it to something that matches with who you are right now.
So Reverend Kiwana, so why don't you sort of share your experience? We opened it up for those that are just joining, that we all three of us Black women have experienced depression at some time in our lives, various points of depression. And I was just asking our expert panelists to give an example. Was it something that came within yourself, or was it outside forces? So share with us what your thoughts have been around being a very learned, educated woman of God. What was your process?
Well, for me, again, you know, being a Black girl growing up in the South in Mississippi, certainly my socialization looked a whole lot different from women who grew up on the East Coast or West Coast or up north, because, you know, I was taught as a Southern girl in the church, you know, you present yourself a certain way, you know, you don't be fast, you know, and so because my body was already mature, even as a young girl, because I have fuller hips. I was naturally a larger, more defined woman, and so my depression was triggered both with internal and external forces. And so a lot of times I didn't realize it necessarily as depression, because I internalized a lot of the stuff that people projected on me, a lot of the things that people said about me. I internalized those things as true because I had nothing else to speak to it being false. There were not a lot of strong women in front of me. Now, certainly, now let me back up a little bit because I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying. My mother is one of 12 children. There are 10 girls and 2 boys. And when I say my mother and her sisters are strong women, they are strong women, but how their strength shows up is defined differently. And so, but I was not fully raised in the home around these women. I was raised in the home with my dad's parents. So I had a more mature woman, much older woman raising me. And when I would go home to my mother, that was my grandmother. So I had these elderly women who were raising me and teaching me a particular way about my presentation, about my look, about what it should and should not. But it never protected me from being violated.
Come on, speak up.
And so because my presentation never protected me, I struggled.
Yeah.
I struggled. And I even struggled to say, okay, God, if this is what your face looks like, if this is who you look like from people who say they love you, then how do I fit into this equation? Where am I in this? Because like Hazel, I knew very early on that I was wrestling with a call on my life. I didn't know what that meant, but very early on, my first awareness of a call was at 18. No,
So
excuse me, 15.
so let's say something. You guys both said something, and just to give our audience even more context, that I think is a really intersectional aspect of the Black woman, how we were reared, what we saw, what was perceived, and what was real. Okay. Okay, so I always talk about that because in Black cultures, Black families, no matter what side of the fence, there's always the perceived and then there's always the real.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Somewhere because of the two, I think, I could be wrong, we find ourselves losing a bit of ourselves and the ability to hold on to our personal power, which makes us easy prey for those who are pedophiles or those who are manipulative, because we hadn't developed the strength to say no, because there was a lot of falsehood in our environment. In all of the truth, there was still a level of falsehood. And that's what I'm talking about when I mention traps, traumas. I'm talking about the fact that, you know, you're much fuller and I was always small, but I had great self-hatred. Oh my God. And I was I was a Christian atheist growing up, even though I went to a Baptist church, which is why I'm a very, I won't call myself an apologist. I'm strong with discipleship, and the Holy Spirit became my mentor because he knew the way that the world wanted, the church world wanted to indoctrinate me because I was smart and energetic. God said, I'm going to enclose you for a few years and make sure you really get your head right. Because I was molested once, I just saw a lot, self-hatred, hated my color, the skin I was in, was smart but didn't know it. And when you're smart and you don't know it, you harm yourself. Okay.
Well, and I was like, when you speak to that, I'll go back to what Hazel said about the reconstructing and the deconstructing of certain things that you are taught. So I had to not only did my theology need to be deconstructed, but I had to be my socialization.
Yes.
How I saw myself.
Yeah.
I was not empowered. I was shamed. I'll never forget one time I was in church and an elder woman told me, she said, I can tell you don't have on a girdle because you're jiggling today. And you cannot know how that affected my self-image and how I believed God even saw me as I presented myself in church. it impacted that in a huge way. So when you talk about trauma, there are so many levels to how someone becomes traumatized, and sometimes even what seems like the wisdom of the elders.
Yeah.
It's traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes traumatic, and they only speak to and speak out of their own personal experiences, which cannot be held against them either.
Yeah.
However, once you have become more learned and more educated about how these things are actually formed,
Yes.
and how they come to really tear you apart as opposed to build you up, that's when the trauma becomes trapped inside of you, and you just become you turn on yourself.
Yeah.
You turn on yourself.
What I want to say, what you bring up for me, Kimwana, is this sort of generational trap trauma, right?
Absolutely.
Because church mothers and saying some of the things that they have said to us when we were younger, right, was to them out of protection, right?
Absolutely.
I want to protect you because I know I'm very aware of the predators, the pedophiles, right, that exist even in our sacred space, right? Be it from their own trauma that they've experienced it. And so I think it's important to name that. I do think that a little bit of the Gen X generation and definitely the millennials, right, have decided like the silencing that comes from the generations before both of the Gen X and millennials, right, is we can't do it anymore, right? Because when we leave that trapped, meaning silenced, right, it manifests itself in more harmful ways, right? Particularly to the people who we love, right? And we want to help, right? We have no doubt that our church mothers loved us, right? And we're trying to do right by us. But it was the silencing of some of the things that they didn't have space themselves, right, to name and to talk about. And it is important to name, right? When you name something, you put that thing out into the light, right? And some things will only begin to transform if they're in the light. So anyway, you just made me think of that.
So here comes the little professor in me. So those of you who are out there in Facebook land and Zoom land, my expert friends and sister girls shared with us, and we just kind of want to give some backdrop to it, that the trap trauma that we're talking about, number one, there's various levels to it, okay? So number one, various levels. Number two, it's complex. It's complex. Yeah, so it's not going to be the same. So we just want you to understand it's complex. Number three, there's generational trap traumas. We want to thank Minister Hazel for that. Generational trap traumas that collide with one another. One may see what they're saying out of protection, where we may say that actually is making me available to be victimized. You understand what I'm saying? Generational trap. That's number three. They told us that we need to name the trauma. Name it. You know, the scripture says in Proverbs that if we lie about our sin, the Bible says we will not prosper. I think it's a sin not to tell the truth about who you are. Woo, glory to God. So when we don't tell the truth about who we are, there's no prosperity about where we're going to be and who we need to become. And that's the revelation that God gave me in regards to just telling the truth in every area of our lives. And then number five, silencing. Trap trauma silences us. It silences our voice. And so with that, let me throw a question out there for you. Give you a scenario and you guys speak to it. All right, a sister girl is listening. She's educated. She's gone through the ranks. She's done all that she needs to do, but finds out that she always feels like she has to overcompensate in the midst of her Black sisters and her Black brothers. What kind of information do you give that sister? What's the thing to start her on a path of healing, to not feel that she needs to compete? Either one.
Well, I just wanted to say, because I almost felt like you were talking about me.
And I love your transparency, because people know I tells it all. Listen, it is what it is. You love me, you don't, but keep going.
Because again, growing up as I was in a space like, and being raised as if I was an only child. And so there were times when I felt like, I kind of felt like the golden child. My mother was 16. My father was 18 when they had me. And so I felt this really heavy pressure to like, once I came into my own self-awareness, I really felt this heavy pressure to like, break this curse, so to speak. And so this need to really appear as whole, appear as well, appear as all together wasn't just about my childhood. That ran a gamut probably up until a few years ago. And I can personally say Howard really saved, entering into the space of the divinity school at Howard really saved me. Because it is where this full awareness, this eye-opening came, that God put none of this on you. God allowed none of this suffering for you. These were experiences that came because of life, and because life happened, and life will continue to happen. God will then intervene and step in and show us now how to rise above, triumph over, come out of these situations where we feel like, life had come to us to destroy us or to break us and tear us down, but so very far from the truth. And so what I would say to this young woman, or to this more mature woman, wherever she is in her life, I would say to her, to still herself, center herself, consider where these emotions are actually being triggered from. Because I know for me, a lot of times, this need to feel like I have to overcompensate or be super on top of quote unquote my game, it came out of childhood experiences. And this need to want to really, and I don't see there's anything wrong with wanting to please a parent. Of course, everybody wants to make their parents proud. But this need to really appear that, that you're doing what you're expected to be doing.
Yeah. I think that is good. And I was going to say, when she first asked, what came up to me is that I don't think Black women hear enough how much they are enough, right?
Absolutely.
Like, we are often, because of society, right, and the real reality of racism and its hierarchy with even within that, right, are often also pushed to the bottom, right? We're seen as the least desirable if we talk about women, right? And so there are so many images that are contrary to our Blackness and all that is us, that tell us we're not enough, right? We need to be thin. We need to be more curvy. We need to have a bigger ass. We need, you know what I mean? There are all these like layers of what a Black woman should be, right? And I think we need to hear more often than not, we are enough, just as we are. I think a lot of us have grown up hearing that, you have to work twice as hard, right, to get the basic things. And that's a real reality. But who we are, like where we are, is enough, right? And then the second piece that made me think of is society, because of the racism, right, the sexism, right, it often does put women against other women, right?
Absolutely.
Or our Black men, when we say, Black women lives matter, here they come like, rah, 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 no, Black men matter. And it's first of all, let me just say, let's not believe the lie of scarcity. Because I think so many of us have fallen into, Lakita, you are back, but so many of us have fallen into this idea that like there's not enough room at the table. Right.
on,
And
sis.
we have been that's been indoctrinated in us, whether that's talking about women who get into positions in leadership at church or at their organizations, right? And they're like, let me close the door. We got one of us. That's enough. And it's
Right.
like, there is enough room for all of us at the table, but they tell us that is not enough room, right? They tell us that it's not enough resources for everybody to be fed and have adequate housing, right? But it is a lie. And so I think even in our interpersonal relationships in our community, we believe that and sometimes feel like we have to compete with our fellow brothers,
Right.
sisters, siblings, right?
Right.
And so, in looking at the whole competition and looking at where we are as Black women, let's go a little bit deeper. I believe that we cannot heal unless we forgive ourselves.
Absolutely.
I've done a lot of work on myself. Right? We said we was gonna go there, so we're gonna go there. And healing self has been the most cathartic experience for me. I think I realized that all of my anxiousness and depression all derived from my inability to trust my decisions because
Yes.
I based them purely off lies, projections, and a trapped trauma of what was true, but I did not know how to get from underneath it. And it made me alive. So how have you, and what would you say to those that are listening? How do we start to heal ourselves? Okay, I had a bad marriage. I chose the person. I knew it was wrong from the jump. You understand me? God warned me, told me I would lose 10 years, did that. And when you know what God says it, and it's not that you're trying to go against God, you just kind of hope that it don't really pan out that way, and then it does. And then the inability to forgive yourself from the shame. Talk to us about the power of forgiving yourself.
Oh, that for me has been a very ongoing work. And if I will safely say, it is a work that I would like to continue with. Simply because, and it's funny because today's Spirit was speaking to me while I was at work, and I had to write all this stuff out on my iPhone because I didn't have my pad with me. I be journaling in some of the weirdest places, but anyway. And so one of the things that Spirit had me to know was that my healing should never be viewed, or let me err on the side of caution saying never. Now is not the moment, even though I have done this great work of healing, both internally and externally, because one thing that people would not know about me, and I would not ever share, was anytime my weight would go through the roof, it was because I was really having some depressive moments. I was really struggling. And so when I wasn't able to talk about those things externally, or didn't feel really safe to talk about those things on an external basis, I would turn on myself. And so when I celebrated my 45th birthday last year, I said, you know what? No more. I'm not turning on myself anymore. We can't stop this. And so, but one thing Spirit reminded me was to not feel like I have arrived at this moment where my healing is complete. My healing should always be ongoing. My healing should renew itself daily, just like the mercies of God. My healing should be a reminder for me that God's grace has truly been sufficient. My healing should be a reminder to me that, if I just say it in layman's terms, that I survived. That whatever I thought was going to take me out, or whatever my enemies, whether they were my physical enemies or the enemies in my head.
Yes.
Whatever those enemies were that I thought was so powerful enough to take me out, by the grace of God, they have not. And so for me, the work of healing has to be continual. It has to be ongoing. Again, just like I mentioned earlier, I've always been a thick girl, a heavy girl. And I am very sure that I will always be. And so because I am aware of that, and listen, I fully own it because I'm 45 plus. At some point, you just gotta say,
all the body on it. Okay.
At some point, you just gotta say, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is glorious, honey.
Yes.
It is glorious. But it is, again, taking myself before the throne, and making. I know I'm sounding real churchy right now, but this is what's coming to me.
Yes.
But taking myself before God, and allowing God to really continue to reveal who I am.
Yeah.
And it's the starting point will always be for me is being honest.
Honest.
Yes.
Accepting the truth about who I am.
Yeah.
Going to do that. And I'm talking about the flawed part of me because listen, it's easy to celebrate the stuff that I know looks good and the stuff that looks good on paper. That's easy to celebrate.
Right.
But for me, the most rewarding thing to celebrate is where I can take a step back and see my flawed self and allow God to remind me of my humanity and allow God to remind me of my need for God and my need for grace and my need for community. Because I think once we self-isolate,
then we're okay. So Halo, tell us, what does that self-forgiveness look like for you? I mean, through your process. I mean, you were very vivid in your conversation at the beginning of our talk that, your call wasn't necessarily accepted by others who had already been called. So forgiving yourself means what for you as a Black woman, wanting to be all that God's called you to be, and yet having a responsibility to possibly free others to become all that they need to be as well. What does forgiving yourself look like? That's deep, I know.
That is what comes up for me is I always remind myself that perfection is not the goal. That I'm not trying to attain some level of like grandeur or splendor or reward, right? I'm simply trying to walk through my life daily with integrity. And what does integrity look like, right?
I was just, that
already said it. Honesty. Being honest with myself. And sometimes that's hard because sometimes when we don't listen to our intuition or that what spirit is nudging us to do or don't do, right? We sit with the consequences of that. And that's a hard place to be in. But it is acknowledging that it was never about doing it perfect. It was never about, having these perfected outcomes. So I'm going to give an example of a relationship, right? Sometimes we as Black women, we enter into relationships with folks and we discover somewhere, in that relationship that this ain't it, right? So you might feel some embarrassment or some shame, especially if you've been public about that relationship, right? But the reality is every relationship is a gift. Every relationship teaches us something about ourselves and about the journey and about the call, right, on our lives, right? So self-forgiveness looks like, Hazel, you had this experience with this person. What did you learn about yourself from that? How did you see God in that relationship, right? And take from that what you can, take the meat of that, and what don't fit, and it is okay.
So wait, so wait a minute, but you said something that I hear a lot from other Black sisters, that they have not found how to take what is good for them and chuck away the other stuff. They feel so guilty. Like this, listen, and you know, and I'm 45 too. I just, you know, but I've just got a newness of thought. Like you know, the greatest deliverance I could have ever gotten, which God allowed me to get that around about 19 years old. I was already an evangelist. I had already been called to ministry, speaking ministry, but I'm so glad that he called me not to the church, but to be a marketplace evangelist. And I think God did that to protect me from those that would say they're of Jesus Christ as well. My mission is to go out into the world and present the gospel to those who will never come to the church. So that's your agnostic, your professors. So he took a little ghetto black girl, come from a big family, roaches and rats, and decided to use his mind, put it in me, and allow his word to make sense to those who don't need God in their own thoughts, and gave me a purpose that you will bring people the gospel every day, every day. And not fight in the pulpit, because he let me know when I was 15, the world is your pulpit. He told me that. So come on, I never worried about my speaker being able to speak every Friday night as an evangelist.
Okay.
I knew the world really was my pulpit. I did everywhere I went, college, UC Berkeley, high school, whatever. That's how they knew me. So here's my question then. So then how in the world do we come to a space where we really grow into our maturity? No, we've not arrived, but if you can celebrate that sister for where she's at, and I'm where she's getting to now, why aren't you celebrating me, sis? What happens that we're unable to do that? Is that that trap trauma still, or what?
I think it is a part of the trap trauma. One of the things that I used to really struggle with that is like, you know, I would say to just have this conversation with God and say, you know, God, I'm this person who loves to applaud people and celebrate, especially women that, you know, are out in the front and doing these great things, you know. And then I would struggle and say, well, where are these women for me? But God had to really steel me and really redirect my thought, in that God had me to know that there was a point in my life where I did not have the capacity to celebrate other women.
Okay, stop. So okay, and I don't know if you can speak to this too, you know, Minister Hazel. How did you know that you didn't have the capacity to celebrate other Black women?
Because I was too broken. I was missing too many pieces in the beginning of my formative life that didn't allow for me to be able to really see clearly how I was important in the world. It didn't allow for me to see my place in the world, even my power in the world. It didn't. You know, early on in my life, I didn't have those spaces that allowed me to do that. And again, you know, this is not to discredit or to knock, because I believe at the end of the day, every part of how I was raised and the people who were a part of that were very instrumental in who I am now. And so, but because, you know, I didn't have the full capacity of knowing how to really love. I wasn't given that. I didn't know how to really love on other women who were doing great things, because if they were doing something that I feel like, you know, oh, I could do that too, you know, instead of celebrating them, I'm standing back saying, how you gonna get that to them? You know, how you allow them to do that? And so I've never been so much this jealous person, but I've always been this person who would always ask God, but why not me? But why not me? Or I would say, well, where do I fit in?
Yes.
Where do I fit in? And so I didn't have the capacity, the emotional, let me clarify that, the emotional capacity, the spiritual capacity, and sometimes, honestly, the physical capacity, because I am empathic. And so sometimes I didn't have the capacity within me to really celebrate. And so as I matured, as I got older, when I identified moments where it was much different for me, not having the capacity to celebrate women in their highest moments, sometimes it was just because I was just literally exhausted.
Mm.
Just
So Ms.
exhausted.
Hazel, you speak to that. Speak to that same question, same scenario, because I think, you know, Reverend Kiwana just really, and I'm also, so what I'm doing is I'm multitasking because I'm looking at the wonderful responses of so many people. Oh my God. So we have like up to 30 folks at watching time, and many people have shared it as we're going on, and they're saying they love this conversation. Thank you for being transparent. Thank you for being, you know, personable. Thank you for speaking our heart. I know a lot of people that are on here, they're educators, they're think tank holders. So thank you guys, but go ahead. Hazel, share with us your concept about, you know, what happens with us, why we're not able to be that way, why do we have to have that kind of trauma, and how do we start to heal from it?
I think that it is important, as Kimwana was talking, the Spirit reminded me that for Black women in particular, right, you have the double oppression of racism and sexism, and then you know, homophobia wherever you find yourself, right, identifying. And it is oftentimes, because this is about mental health in the church, right, where, because the church is still so male dominated in leadership, a lot of Black women find themselves feeling very overlooked by God. Let me just name that, because in the sacred space, right, there is this internalizing where things happen to you and it's like, where is God? What is God doing? God, you do not see me, right? And so when you have that kind of lingering happening, even, and I'll give the example of there are a lot of women who, you know, play by all the rules, right? And, you know, decided they was going to wait till marriage, or, you know, did all these different things and still were not what we call chosen, right? Or still haven't found that husband, right? So in that way, some, you know, women who really want to be partnered, whether same gender, whether hetero, whatever, right? And haven't found that, right? There's a feeling of being overlooked. And I think as a result of what I just named, that sexism, that racism, patriarchy comes into play, right? Where you have women who, when they see other women getting what they feel they deserve, or they know they've played by the rules in order to have, right? There comes the capacity to feel overlooked, right? To feel like, hey, God, I am doing all of these things. Where? You know, where's my overflow? You know, and so I think that is part of it. The other piece is the very realness of what Kiwana even mentioned, again, the exhaustion of Black women, because we are tired. We labor in so many ways, you all, and often labor without being credited for our labor, right?
That's heavy.
And that's, I'm sorry, this is the same situation, but that SHIT is tiring. It is exhausting. And then to have to care for our loved ones, right? And then oftentimes not having the space to then get respite for ourselves. We're tired. And so I think that sometimes too, when you can see other women, especially in this day and age, right, when social media is showing you everything from Black love goals to whatever, right? It's, you know, everything's enticing you to feel a certain way if you're not within yourself grounded, right? And on solid ground, right? And that sometimes is what happens as well.
So I mean, you know, my brain is racing, and I'm just thinking about, you know, where we started off in this conversation, and of course, we would definitely have to have a part two, and just really let's just think out. I'm letting you guys know right now, we would definitely have a part two, and just really make it a candid conversation and dig a little deeper, because the responses of the people, because I always do things that will enhance people's lives and empower them, is really pointing to the fact that now that we've gotten educated, now that we've gotten various leadership roles and things of that nature, now how do I ward myself from reliving the trapped trauma? Because I always tell people when I'm talking, teaching, speaking, trauma, pain, both of them have memory. And what we do to that, we give attention to that memory and we start rehearsing. Rehearsing means to rehear and then sing what you have heard. If you look at that whole word, rehearsing. So we sing what we hear and it becomes who we are. So very powerful. And I want every Black woman that's watching, especially those who felt maybe like Waters felt 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, where she just decided she was going to hang herself. So there was really methodical thought into this. That I mean, my mind and my spirit is torn because we've got to talk and let Black women know we not only hear you, but we're here for you. Because we are exhausted. A lot of us, we're exhausted. And I think that if I couldn't really run to God and really run in his presence, whatever state I'm in, good, bad, up, down, flawed, I'm perfectly flawed. I am. But he allows me to bring all of my imperfection to him and go someplace. As a way to share with the listeners, I want you to pretend for a second that you're speaking to every single Black woman in the United States, in the world. Let's just make it big. And you've got 1 minute, and this is your 1 minute commercial to share something heartfelt from you to them. What do you say? Any one of you guys can start. Give me a second. I'm going to spotlight you because I want every Black woman to feel empowered, but I want us to quit hiding behind our accomplishments. I want you to hold your accomplishment where it needs to be, fall on your knees and say, but I've got a lot of issues that's prohibiting me from being all that I need to be with a partner. Hello. I can have the body, but if I don't have the mind to maintain the
Okay.
I can have the mind educationally, but not relationally. Hello. I know how to do well at the the boardroom, but when he's wanting to make love to me, I can't turn on because I didn't tell him that I was raped by 2 people. And it's still, you understand what I'm saying? Just telling him if we think he's our safe place, honey, help me deal with it. I was raped 2 times, but I need to feel it every time you touch me. So how are we gonna do that? And help him to be a part of that therapeutic process. Okay. And he be comforting in his voice and say, just don't flinch. I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to help you. So you got 1 minute to share with every Black woman in the world your heart about becoming untrapped.
I want to say that you owe yourself the gift of therapy. And I am under no illusions that all of us can afford therapy, right? There are some of us who cannot, but I urge you to reach out to your community resources, right? To some of the online resources around like Talkspace, and talk to someone. It is important for us to name what has happened to us. Because when we release things, we can release that from our bodies as well. And we just talked about how what happens to us carries memory, and it often carries memory in our bodies. So even if you got a best friend, you got to talk to mama, to grandma, but get in the form of a space where you can speak and name what has happened, right? And I also want to say that as Black women, we experience so many levels of trauma, right? Daily, even from microaggressions, right? To the very heavy stuff of being survivors of sexual assault, right? And you owe it to yourself to do what you need to get to that healing. Because we are not the things that happen to us, you all. We are not the things that happen to us. And we are not demonized. We are not Jezebels, right? We are fully human Black women deserving of every single good thing. Every single good thing, right? And that God sees us and that God loves us and wants us to live whole, because we were created whole, but the lie tells us that we're broken, right? So it's about finding those resources, those spaces that help us live into that wholeness. And so I just offer you love and know that you are enough.
Wow. That just blessed my entire spirit.
I want to first say, I say an amen to everything that Minister Hazel has already said, and really re-emphasizing if your abilities, if you have the abilities to step inside of therapy, give yourself permission to do that. And I know sometimes that can be the most difficult part of the journey towards healing that you're in, especially if you're socialized a particular way to say, you know, we keep our business in the house, but sister, I tell you, keeping your business in the house has almost killed you. Mm-hmm. And so now what I say to you is give yourself a fair chance. Give yourself the chance that you are so deserving of in this world, to be healed, and not just healed, but to be fully whole. And as you are finding these safe spaces and these sacred spaces, whatever sacredness looks like for you, then my hope and my prayer for you is that you will just continue to see yourself as the jewel, the gem, and everything that's beautiful about God has already created you to be. And once you are able to embody your self-worth, fully embody your self-worth, then your ability to love yourself is going to be amazing. I just want to encourage you to take each day gently, take it with grace. The people that you find yourself in community with, demand that they affirm you.
Absolutely.
Demand that they affirm you. Demand that they see you. Demand that they hear you. Because you are worthy of all of that. I love you. I am cheering for you. And I know that you're going to be okay. I'm believing for you.
Wow. This has been quite the time, and I want to be sensitive to what I believe the Spirit of the Lord is just doing for the moment. I sense and see all of you guys' posts right now, and I just sense just a presence of God to just heal us. And let me just say to my Black sisters, man, there's so much inside of us that we've not even tapped into yet. So much. And if I can say any one thing, everything that you ever see me, your sister, do, as I'm sure it's probably true with our other sisters on the panel today, it's merely been because we've had a pushing from the Spirit to keep going when everything in us was saying stop. We are only here because God is who He is and He has a plan. And with that, I dare you to get out of your head long enough. Hallelujah. Get out of your head long enough to live like tomorrow is the last day. The fact that the world can be shut down since March 16th, where there was no one on the freeway driving their cars for at least almost 3 weeks, tells me that not only do people have power, if they have enough power to do that and shut down economies all over the world, then can you imagine the creator of the universe who's in us, what kind of power, glory to God, he has given us. It's limitless, limitless power. And the greatest power is to self-heal. And yeah, because when you self-heal, forgive, everything that's good that needs to be attracted to you, it's already there. It's already there. So as we get ready to close out, um, I don't even know what to say. People are texting me. Beautiful thing that they absolutely loved this session. They're calling it as a session because they feel where we're at.
Yeah.
To our Black brothers, we just want to say to you, Father's Day was yesterday, but I think in my brain I want to make a concerted effort. I highly recognize men. I've got some of my greatest trainings from men. Um, but may I encourage you to also get the trapped trauma out of your head too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And from your dear sister and cheerleader, release the trapped trauma. We are not your enemy. Although the world system will try to make that to be, still have the pom-pom in our hand. Now, if you decide to run the other way, all, well, we can't cheer for you if you're on the other team. But if you're still with us and you're
well,
we here, we ride or die, Bonnie and Clyde.
Ooh,
No one's going to jail for someone that they don't know where they're going. No one's going to take an emotional hit when they don't know that 2 weeks from now, they'll at least be comforted by that same flesh. That we are here for you, but we need you to get released too. Any last words that you brilliant sisters have to say to our lovely audience that's everywhere? We have somebody chimed in, I think from Ghana. So kudos to Ghana because it's late. Child,
it's morning or something, right?
Yes.
I just thank you so much for this conversation. I know we didn't get into the nitty gritty of mental health, but I understand that scripture tells us, 3 John 1 and 2 says, "Beloved, I wish that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers." So this is priority. Your emotional, mental well-being is priority. And so plug in where you can to make sure that that is well, because God wants that to be well. So thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. So much love to everyone who chimed in.
Wow.
Yes, ditto. Thank you. No, I was going to say ditto. Thank you so much for this tremendous opportunity to really share and talk on this subject because it is a very important subject that we need to continue to have conversations about. And my prayer for my sisters is that we will not be afraid nor ashamed of making ourselves a priority. Because when we are not well, our communities are not well.
Sure. Yes.
Well, you guys heard it here on our Mental Monday show. We concluded with our Mind Matters series. I feel a part 3 coming on. And so we talked about trapped traumas, and we just wanted to bring the real to you from our hearts to yours. And we're just so grateful for Minister Hazel Cherry. And we're also really grateful for Reverend Kinwana McGrigg, and we're just excited for their expertise in what I feel is a great sisterhood. I felt very connected to my sisters. So thank you guys very, very much. To those of you who are on our Zoom chat room, hang with us. Once we get off live, we always have this little after show. So you get a chance to hang with us and interact with us. To those that are on Facebook Live, I love you. You never cease to support and to share and to input. And you're fantastic. You're the greatest audience. And now let's make us go big. Make this viral so we can get a healing everywhere. We love you. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful Monday. Blessings to you.